Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we explore the intersection of art and big ideas. I am Sean Malone, Creative Director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of the Out of Frame YouTube series. Here today, not in studio, as you can see, with me is Paul Nelson, FEE's Head of Social Media and Marketing Manager, and of course, Jen Mapasanti, who's now Director of Communications at the Libertas Institute. How are you guys doing?
Doing really well.
Well, don't all hit me at once.
Coming off a late night, for the parents with the opening night movie that we just watched.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Jungle Cruise, and of course, just like through sheer weird scheduling circumstances, we kind of had to do this remote, and we're doing it on Friday, literally the day after opening night. The only showtime I had available to me was 7. I was actually kind of hoping I could just watch it at home on the Disney Plus, but they did not allow me to do that in time to watch this, or to record this. So here we are. We will be getting into Jungle Cruise in just a second, I'm sure we'll talk about it. You guys probably have a lot of thoughts on appropriateness for kids. I think there's a lot of things in this movie that we can get into in a bit. But I think firstly, I want to talk about the really big news, which is Scarlett Johansson suing suing Disney, basically, for breach of contract. So this is a pretty interesting situation to me. Scarlett Johansson is claiming, and I'll get into my thoughts on this in a second, but she's claiming that Disney, by releasing Black Widow on Disney Plus the same time that they released it in theaters, they are in breach of her contract with Marvel, which stipulates that there should be some kind of a theatrical window. This is always fairly classic stipulation in a lot of these kinds of contracts, but she should have a theatrical window, in part because her bonus schedule for the film and for her compensation for the film is predicated on box office performance. So if they undercut the box office, which is, I think, the claim in the lawsuit, if they undercut the box office by having it also released on VOD, then they're undercutting her, part of the pay potential that was part of her negotiation and why she accepted to do the movie in the first place. So I don't know. This is really big news, and it's also something that I think you're going to see more of in the near future, because this is a big shift in the industry. I don't know, Jen, have you been paying attention to this? Are you guys keeping up with this?
Yeah, I've been paying attention to it a little bit, and I think she has a really solid case. If it is accurate that her contract stated that there would be a exclusive theatrical window, and then there wasn't, and Disney is in fact in breach of contract for that film and for her payment schedule and all that good stuff. So I think she has a strong case based on that, and I think that this is a very strong signal to production companies that also handle distribution. So many of these companies are focusing on their streaming platforms and the growth of their streaming platforms almost to the exclusion of everything else. And I think that this is the beginning of a reckoning. I don't know how it's going to actually shake out or what I actually want to be the end result of all of this, but it is a very strong signal that actors are people too. They put their labor into these productions as well. And when distributors and producers are, favoring streaming platform growth over everything else to the extent that they are in actual breach of contract, then that's not something that's going to be tolerated.
So let me read to you guys the Disney released a statement today. I think it's today. I'm going to quote this. There is no merit whatsoever to this filing. The lawsuit is especially sad and distressing in its callous disregard for the horrific and prolonged global effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Disney has fully complied with Ms. Johansson's contract, and furthermore, the release of Black Widow on Disney Plus with Premier Access has significantly enhanced her ability to earn additional compensation on top of the $20 million that she received to date. So that was their reply. Bringing COVID into it seems like a weird move.
The horrifying COVID conditions that we have decided to open our theme parks up fully. So yeah, so scary out there. Disney. Oh boy, they are just on thin ice as far as their. I mean, we're going to talk about a Disney movie after this, but
yeah,
so this is just anecdotal, but I went to the screening of Black Widow for the podcast. My theater was full, and
mine was really full. Yeah,
and obviously there's a pent up demand for this kind of stuff, and Marvel's always going to put people in the seats. But you treat top actors like this, and it's not somebody that people dislike. It's Scarlett Johansson. She's one of the most popular actresses working today, and this is pretty clear signal that Disney doesn't care. Just do the movie. Plug and play, do the movie. And they've been pretty blessed with the talent they've gotten from Marvel so far. And if they keep doing this kind of stuff and writing responses like this, and you're reading this, and this is the first time I've really heard it, but kind of sounds like Trump wrote it and just threw in a couple of big words in there. And that sounds like a Trump response. And it's just so at hopping that it's crazy.
Well, it's super weird because it's like, yeah, like you said, I mean, they're not really worried about the COVID pandemic in other areas, first of all. And secondly, like, it's hobbling the movie theaters as well. I think Jen was actually just flat out right at the beginning, which is that, like, what they're actually doing is trying to boost their streaming service, right? Like, that's really their goal here, is to try to get more people onto Disney Plus and, and cut out, to a large extent, cut out the middleman, right? Like, there's kind of this sense that, like, if they do a theatrical release, they're splitting with distributors, they're paying for prints to be made. Like, there's all of these expenses that they don't really have if they get to go directly to streaming. Of course, the theaters don't want this. A lot of audiences, myself to some extent included, don't want this, right? I mean, I don't know what I want in terms of, like, day and date release kind of stuff, because I do kind of like that. Like, as a consumer, I kind of like that I have the option. But again, if your contract is predicated on box office performance, I mean, global gross right now for Black Widow is what I say to you guys earlier. It's like $320 million or something like that. I'd have to go back to our conversation and take a look at it, but it's not that high, to be honest. And my concern, I mean, I would be concerned if I were Scarlett Johansson that it's not going to be, like, there's no way that it's going to get to the $1 billion mark that it's, a lot of the other Marvel movies have been. And I'm sure that her contract is really predicated on milestones, right? Like, I have to imagine that they've said, like, if it makes X amount, you get X bonus. If it makes Y amount, you get Y bonus. But I'm also certain that her contract is predicated on the money that it's taking in at the theaters, and not on streaming, because as far as I can tell, like, basically no streaming platform has been forthcoming in any way about either their metrics or giving people any, like, royalties or bonuses. I'm sure there may be royalties, but, like, they're not getting bonuses and things off of streaming performance, because historically that was like a video, like, that was like home video that didn't count to those things in the past. We're just in a weird territory right now. And I don't know.
And let's also not forget that Black Widow has been in the can for almost a year.
Yeah.
When this contract was negotiated, COVID wasn't a thing. Like, nobody expected for us to be home for a year and a half. prevalence of streaming services was not nearly at the level that it is today, like there was no reason to include proceeds from premium VOD streaming in a contract negotiation before COVID hit, really. Unless you were making a movie dedicated to Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect her contract was probably negotiated 2 or 3 years ago at least, because I mean, she was probably in whatever the last round of overall like big, overall deal negotiations she was doing with Marvel. So it's probably like a 3-picture or 4-picture or something like that. And I'm sure it was negotiated for all of the movies that she was going to appear in for Marvel over the next 5 years or whatever that period was. So, I don't blame her at all. I also don't really trust that Disney is like necessarily doing right by everybody in this case. Like, I don't think that I think that they're probably looking at streaming revenue as pure profit to Disney and not, going to any of the people that they negotiated stuff with. And to be fair, like it's probably true that they don't have contracts with people for any of that stuff, which is fine, except that they're sitting here, like it seems to be the case, although all this remains to be seen, of course, but like it sort of seems to me to be the case that Disney is kind of trying to have its cake and eat it too. Like on the one hand, they're trying to say like, well, COVID completely upended everything, so of course we had to make changes, and you're being callous in disregarding like the effect that COVID has had on all of this stuff. And at the same time, they're saying, but we're not going to budge. We're not going to give you a percentage of streaming profits as a result. So like, I don't think you can have it both ways there. I don't think you can say like, well, too bad about the box office, but also too bad about the way that we ended up doing it. We're not going to give you a piece of that either. Then I don't know. Like I said, it kind of feels like a slam dunk to me, but there's lawsuits are tricky. I haven't seen the contract. I haven't read the contract. I have no idea what it is. I'm not a lawyer. So, all those disclaimers, but still it feels kind of dicey to me. I don't see Disney looking real good on this one.
No, this is not a good look for Disney, especially because this kind of contract is in favor of the studio, because Robert Downey Jr. started this with Iron Man. He took a huge risk, signed upfront money for a lot less than normal at the time in anticipation or betting on himself, betting on the movie that it would be a huge hit. And it was. And now that's kind of become the norm for Marvel movies because it's almost expected that these movies will do well. But having Disney go into the mat to protect some kind of percentage with a huge movie star when the contract she signed is in your favor to get somebody to actually put an effort in, I really, I mean, I don't get it. It's a weird business relationship move.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Like Disney, I feel like, a lot of the things that we've criticized Disney for over the last couple years, not only like on the podcast, but also like, out of frame episodes and stuff. Like I've criticized Disney over a couple things, and, most notably their appeasement of China. But like, I don't understand. Like, I'm kind of curious as to like, at what point fans will go like, the company itself seems sleazy enough that like, I don't really want to, so, all right. So that let me segue into the Jungle Cruise thing, because I think this is a good opportunity for this. Like, Jungle Cruise for me is a movie that I almost certainly would not have. I definitely wouldn't have seen it opening night. I may have seen it at some point because I kind of see everything, but like I wouldn't have rushed out to see it. I wouldn't have bought it on VOD for $30. Like, there's no reason outside of the show that we're doing right now. There's just no version of this where I would have gone out and watched this movie. And part of that is the calculus of like, how much money do I want to just throw at Disney because, if they have produced a product that I'm really, really excited about, like I'll go see Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I'm looking forward to that. There are things about that like I'm kind of excited about, and I'll go watch that movie. The Eternals, maybe not. Like I'm kind of at this point with Marvel where it's like there's a lot of Marvel stuff where I'm not really that excited about it anymore. Shang-Chi, I'm looking forward to it. I'll check it out. Fine. But like almost everything else that Disney's putting out right now, I don't really care that much about. The vast majority of it is weird remakes or, live action versions of things that they've already done, like the Little Mermaid thing that they're about to do. Like, I don't have any interest in any of that. Were it not for the fact that we do a pop culture show, I probably wouldn't go see almost any of that stuff. And part of that, like for me, kind of comes back to like the company itself is not worth my dollars in a lot of cases. Some of this, I don't know if you guys heard this, or I don't think I mentioned this to you before, but do you guys know Eric July? Eric is a buddy of mine. We're not close friends or anything, but he's a little bit of a buddy, and he's appeared as a voice in Common Sense Soapbox episodes a couple times. And Eric has a YouTube channel that's very popular. But Eric had made an argument that I kind of liked, which was like, you're not going to be able to give, like, he's not calling for a boycott or trying to shut people out of participating in pop culture or any of that. But he said, like, just give 51% of your money to creators that don't hate you, which is sort of his advice. And I'm kind of with that. Like, it's hard to figure out. And obviously this is kind of like a rule of thumb and not like a real tight thing that you can actually do. But I kind of dig the idea of going like, Disney doesn't need all my money. Like I don't need to go out and see a Disney movie first thing every single time that they come out with a new movie. And I guess, for me, like that kind of gets us to where, for Jungle Cruise, because like Jungle Cruise is fine. I didn't hate the movie, but there are so many things about the movie that are missed opportunities. They're not really that good. It's very clearly like an attempt to do another version of Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's pulling like a 50s theme park ride that is pretty mediocre and trying to turn it into a big bombastic swashbuckling franchise. And it's trying to do that. And it's got, big name actors and all the special effects, not all of which come together very well, by the way, but it's doing all of that. But like, I don't have a reason to care about it. And I didn't particularly care about, like, the story is fine. I don't know. For me, it was just like the big picture for me and Jungle Cruise is it's fine. It's, to Paul's oft repeated point, it's another piece of content, So I don't know, Paul, what, like, you just saw it last night. Did you bring the kids or no?
Oh, no. This was actually a date for my wife and I. So that was nice to get out of the house together and have some alone, quote unquote, alone time. But so this movie, I'm sorry.
Alone with the Rock.
Alone with the Rock. I can smell it. So I went into this. I posted this on the Discord when I was heading over there, that I didn't look at any reviews because I kind of assumed they would be bad, and they are. And so I went in this clean, and I guess I'll start with kind of a synopsis. So sorry in advance, I don't remember any of the characters' names, so I'm just going to refer to them as their real names. So I'll try to help you. Thank you. So we're introduced to a character at the beginning, Emily Blunt, who is obviously very talented. Lily. Okay, thank you. And who's obviously very talented, and is seeking an arrowhead to go to the Amazon and get a petal from the tree that could solve every single disease known to man. And that pretty much puts our plot into motion.
Literally cures death, this thing.
Pretty much. Anything.
Impressive.
It's a big deal. And what was funny, so I went into this, I'd had no expectations, and the first act comes, and it was good. Borderlining on great. You knew every character's motivations. It was funny. It was tight. You knew where the story was heading. And then they got on the Amazon. And just like the Amazon, it was winding and you got nowhere. And then in the end, you're just left feeling kind of sticky and gross.
Oh man. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think like there are a lot, and that's the thing. Like there are a lot of things really in the opening of this movie that are a lot of the things that I really like about it. Like you said, the characters are really clear. They're set up pretty well. I know who everybody's going to be. The Rock actually ends up like we meet him. This was actually, I thought, from an editing standpoint, kind of an interesting choice because they did a whole opening scene with Emily Blunt, and we learned her character and her brother McGregor, played by Jack Whitehall. We met the two of them in London, and then we did a whole like basically cold open for the movie with that, which would have been sort of the setup and everything else. But then we did another whole setup scene. So it was like the movie kind of had dual opening scenes, which was kind of interesting. So we met her, then we went to the Amazon, met The Rock. Met The Rock, he's just doing jungle cruises. He's just a boat guide, basically. And he's making all these dad jokes and all these puns and stuff, and they're so dopey, but they were kind of endearing to me. Like they're and like also my wife does the same thing. So like we were kind of laughing because they were very much her jokes. Like they were the kind of jokes that she would make in these kinds of situations. But but that was kind of funny. And this little girl was like, "Oh, somebody make him stop," and she's like, "No, nobody can make me stop. Like it can't be stopped."
No, yeah.
Like, stuff like that. I loved that setup to it. I thought that part was really good. But to your point, yeah, once it gets into the Amazon, it gets one. Jen, right before we started, I had to jump on a little bit late, so I kind of jumped into part of their like pre-conversation or whatever. But you mentioned fun and games in this movie. You said the fun and games weren't that fun, and so I wanted to explain that to people. Like in screenwriting, well, at least in terms of like the way that Blake Snyder writes about screenwriting, there's a part of a screenplay which is usually kind of the middle, like really the middle quarter of the movie, let's call it, is a lot of times often referred to as fun and games, and it's where, I think this is also Blake Snyder refers to it as the promise of the premise, right? Which is like, you're on a jungle cruise. All of the trailers and everything have indicated to us that there's going to be, shenanigans happening on the Amazon River as they cruise together down the Amazon River. So that should be like the fun stuff. That's all the trailer stuff. It's all the stuff that should be really swashbuckly and really fun. And that is kind of the stuff that a lot of times like kind of falls flat in this movie. I don't know, Jen, was that your take?
Yeah, I mean, it's called the promise of the premise for a reason. This premise is why people chose to watch a movie before they really knew anything about it. Like, it's supposed to be the real hook, the real draw. That's why people are interested in this. You promised this to them. And then when you failed to deliver on the quote unquote fun and games, which depending on the genre of your movie may not be all that fun or all that gamey, but still,
sure.
that's why people are watching your movie.
Yeah.
And
so let me go on. Go on. I've got two examples. Yeah. All right. So I had two examples of this that I want to talk about. So like to Jen's point, fun and games doesn't always have to be fun. I mean, it's fun for the audience, but it doesn't always have to be like bright and sunny and whatever. John Wick, really, really good example. Everything that happens you go into that movie knowing that John Wick is going to tear through a bunch of bad guys. And that movie delivers in spades. Like the minute that you're into the second act of the movie, it's on, and it's on for the entire rest of the movie. You are not walking away from that movie going, I was sold a bill of goods here. I was told that John Wick was going to really, destroy some of these mob guys, but yeah, he didn't really do a whole lot. No, he did a whole lot, right? Another movie, and this one I actually probably want to revisit a couple times in this conversation, is Jumanji, the new one, right? again, starring The Rock, which is really interesting. That movie, I walked out of thinking, wow, that movie was like 20 times better than I thought it was going to be. And it was better than it had any business being, is how I felt about that movie. Precisely because once you get into Jumanji and they're into the jungle in that movie, it is funny and hilarious, and all of the jungle things and the game things that are happening happen. And they happen in a big, bombastic, funny way. And you get to see them try to, all of that stuff works really well for me in Jumanji. And it's kind of the same setup in this movie, right? Like, this is a jungle cruise. We should be experiencing very similar kinds of things. And The Rock plays a sort of similar character, because The Rock kind of always plays that character, right? He's very confident. He's very physically capable. He kind of winks at the camera a whole lot. And he tells jokes, and he's funny. He's got good comic timing, and everything about that kind of works for me. But it falls flat in a lot of areas. And one of the reasons I think it falls flat is actually because I think it's miscast. And that kind of, I want to open up this territory of discussion a little bit, because I walked out of this movie thinking that I didn't really like The Rock as a romantic lead. And I've thought this many times. Like, I've had this thought on a lot of, including in Ballers, right? Like he's quite often a love interest for various female characters on the show Ballers on HBO. And I don't buy it, and I don't really like it, and I'm not entirely sure why. I feel like there's something about The Rock that on camera reads as disingenuous to me. Like, he's very genuine as The Rock, but he's not the greatest actor of all time, so he ends up not being very genuine in the role. I don't know if that's going to be clear, if anybody else is going to feel that way. But on the other hand, Emily Blunt, I think, is really a top-tier talent. Like, she is a truly wonderful actress. Her range is incredible. She goes from playing like physically tough, strong characters to like ultra vulnerable characters, and she can do all of this like really, really effectively. And she is a great love interest in a ton of movies. I mean, honestly, you just have to look at A Quiet Place to see her range from across the board, right? Like, going from like ultra vulnerable mom to like super physically tough, like unstoppable willpower, right? Like, and she is great at all that kind of stuff. The pairing for me didn't work at all in this, because I think they're really mismatched. I walked out of the movie thinking that I would change The Rock. And then my wife, as we were driving home, convinced me that Emily Blunt is the one who was wrong in this movie, which is a bold thing. But I kind of realized, if the movie is going to be what it is, if it's going to feature situations where there's, all right, spoilers, by the way, once they're in the jungle, the big villain, well, the real villain, I guess, in the movie is Kaiser Wilhelm's son, played by Jesse Plemons. He's Prince Joachim, but the magical villain, the mystical villain that brings this back into the kind of Pirates of the Caribbean world is a set of Spanish conquistadors who were cursed to basically live within sight of the Amazon River for all eternity. Essentially, they tried to go after this magical tree, the flower from this magical tree, and they were deemed not worthy. And we'll talk about that in a second. But like, the movie is filled with wacky setups and it's just super over the top things. Like, he's got this old decrepit boat that barely functions, and they like nearly get themselves thrown off a waterfall, and somehow it's got the engine power to just overcome the current, which is insane. And it's just one of these things that, like, it's like Black Widow, when Black Widow falls 12 stories, banging on every single steel bar and like ductwork that she can on the way down, and then literally lands on her feet. You just go, okay, this world has no rules. Like, there's no stakes to this. She's never going to die. The plot armor is completely impenetrable. Like, these characters are not in peril in any sense or shape of the word. So that's fine, except for now I don't believe anything about the movie. So I would take Emily Blunt out of the movie and I would put somebody else in who can do this similarly kind of tongue-in-cheek, really bombastic stuff. And hilariously, the name that came up when we were talking about this in the car was Karen Gillan, who was in Jumanji. So like I would just put the two of them together in this movie and have them do what they did in Jumanji again. But whatever, man. It's what's done is done at this point. But I don't know. Like, those are the aspects for me that just like they just make it not a very satisfying story. So I kind of gave up. But I don't know, Jen, you wanted to talk about the Conquistadors for a minute, because that's a kind of a big part of this movie. What are your thoughts?
I mean, okay, so we have some pretty wild premises that we're just accepting as true in this film, right? We've got a magical tree that has flowers that are literal panaceas. They can cure any ailment, they can break any curse, right? All right. And so then we have some conquistadors who have been cursed to a miserable immortal existence. Sure, let's go with that. So that's some suspension of disbelief there that we're already working on, just a little bit. And the reason that the conquistadors were cursed was that they actually did manage to get to the correct tribe in the Amazon to access this magical tree, but they were turned away and they were told that they were not worthy. And the implication there was that there would be like some horrible mystical consequences if someone who was unworthy plucked the flowers from this tree. So, okay, all right.
Those consequences were not specified, by the way. Like, nobody said what would happen. It was just the chief of this tribe just asserting that they're not worthy.
Basically. So there's some implication of there being negative mystical consequences if someone who is unworthy gets to the tree and tries to take the flowers. All right. So that's already baked into the plot that we're working in here. So then we've got Kaiser Wilhelm's son, whose name I'm never going to remember, and it's
Joachim.
Joachim.
Yeah, he made a real, production out of that at one point.
Prince Jerkface with a U-boat in the Amazon, because of course he does.
Why not? Why not?
Because why not? As one does. So he has very explicitly stated that his goal in getting these flowers is so that Germany can win World War I and basically take over the world. The stated goals for Emily Blunt's character, Lily, is that she wants this flower so that she can revolutionize medicine, so that she can save the lives of untold millions of people all over the world. And she doesn't care if she's never met them or not. People are sick and they're hurting and they need to be helped, and that's why she's doing this. All right, so we have two very different motivations for these two characters. One is clearly extremely selfish and imperialist and not great, and one is very selfless and is trying to improve the world as a whole. I think the tribesmen would say that Prince Joachim is not worthy.
Yeah.
But he still manages to get to the tree and nothing mystically bad happens to him.
No. Well, he never even, he never even personally touches the flower, I don't think. But he could, like, there's nothing stopping him other than just time. Like, he just ran out of,
Yeah.
I mean, we're spoiling all of this. I apologize, everybody in advance. We're like totally spoiling the third act of the movie here. But like, also, if you were surprised by the fact that it all comes to a head at the magical tree, you should read more stories, or maybe watch another movie or two, because that was inevitable from literally the first scene in this movie. But in any case, that's weird. But I would also point out that the conquistadors, the Aguirre, is the leader of the conquistadors, and who ends up being cursed. So this is like 400 years later, whatever it is. But like, Aguirre, his motivation is actually to get to the flower to save the life of his dying daughter, which is, I don't really feel, I mean, it's a little selfish in the sense that it's like, he wants to save his daughter and not the entire world's sick people or whatever. But it's, he's not going, like, he didn't go there to go like, well, I'm going to take this back to Spain and we're going to take over the world. Like, that wasn't his motivation. His motivation was, I got to get there because my daughter's dying, which I feel like would be worthy. Anyway, by the way, in that whole sequence, he was told that he was unworthy before he did anything wrong with respect to his dealings with the tribe. So like, his dealings with the tribe were basically like, he showed up nearly dead. They brought him back to life. He and his other like handful of conquistadors who were still around at that point seemed to have a decent relationship with the people of the tribe. And then he was told he was unworthy, and then he tried to take the flower by force, which then turned into the curse and the whole thing. But also, like, I don't know. I mean, what are the rules for what makes you worthy or not worthy? Like, it just seems like the chief of that tribe just gets to decide who gets to see it or not, which, okay, but there doesn't seem to be any real rules on that. Because I feel like if your motivation is, I'm going to save the life of my dying daughter, I don't know, I'd probably give it to him. Like, nah. But of course, it's like, he's a Spanish conquistador, and we're supposed to think of them as evil, rapacious monsters who took over. Except for they don't even get into that. It's the other part of this, is like, they don't even make them, like, they really go out of their way to sort of humanize these conquistadors, and there's a really good reason that they do that. They kind of have to. Shall I spoil the big reveal here? I don't know if everybody is going to be shocked by this, but I'll give a massive spoiler alert here. If you want to not hear this, you're going to have to pause and skip ahead like 10 minutes or whatever. But The Rock is one of those cursed conquistadors. That's the big like second act turn here, is that sort of midpoint turn that he gets stabbed and he looks like he dies. Turns out he's not dead. And in fact, he was one of Aguirre's men, but he was the only one of his men who would not participate in the murder of the people, the villagers, in an attempt to get the flower. So but he gets cursed anyway, which is the other partly weird thing, is like, he stands up to his guy and he still gets cursed. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of strange. Like, the lessons aren't really clear here. Like, do the right thing, get cursed. Do the wrong thing, get cursed. Like, come to it for the best reasons and have no problem getting there. Come to it for the worst reasons, have no problems getting there. Like, I don't know. Anything is anything. Everybody has to end up at the tree at the end. I mean, that's sort of the gist that I got. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of weird moments like that I'm kind of baffled by. I'm also a little baffled by why in the Amazon rainforest there's so many Italian dudes, because the entire village is like Paul Giamatti as this Italian man, and like all of his Italians who are in this village. I don't really know how that happened, but
I don't know.
So I don't think that. So we were talking about the casting earlier. I don't know if it's really. I think it's more comes down to a writing issue. The whole conquistador side mission, you didn't need it. You didn't need that at all. The Rock didn't need to be a conquistador. Aguirre's character was, I mean, you show him with his dying daughter, and then you think there's going to be some kind of he's going to see the light and help
Mhm.
the Rock or something, save whatever. Nope, doesn't happen. Just cut all that stuff out. You already have two great villains with Jesse Plemons and Paul Giamatti, and
Sure.
they have motivation. Who gets to the tree first? It's not that difficult, but it seems that they just couldn't
Yeah.
quite. They needed to shove in imperialism's bad stuff as well,
and magic.
but
They had
kind
to
of half
get
baked.
more magic in there too.
But
I think they're trying to set up a Pirates of the Caribbean thing. Like they wanted another like crew of cursed, cursed.
Remind me, I haven't seen the first Pirates of the Caribbean in over a decade, probably. But is there any magic in the first one?
Yeah,
I mean,
the whole. Yeah, I mean, there's the cursed, Flying Dutchman or the Black Pearl. I guess is just in the first movie, but like it's all the crew of the Black Pearl are all undead, monstrous people who had been cursed to go down with the ship, but then whatever, and so yeah, the only real magical elements are Jack's compass and the Black Pearl itself. That's like the majority of it, but it still starts off this like undead cursed monster thing, and it's the same in here. It's like here's some cursed conquistadors, in that case obviously cursed pirates, but same era also, because we're talking about like 1500s 1600s Spaniards basically, in the New World also, so not too far off. Like you could create a Pirates of the Caribbean extended universe with this pretty easily.
Don't give them any ideas.
Good.
Oh, I'm sure they already had that idea. I'm sure I'm not. Oh man, I don't know, dude. I agree though. Like you don't really need it. You just need it to be a MacGuffin that gets them to the tree, and then who gets there first, and then who does the right thing at the tree or whatever. But then you also have to change it so that the tree so that there's consequences for people doing the wrong thing or trying to take the leaves of the tree for the wrong reasons or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you could easily have that explained by the same the same tribe leader that they had the arrowhead read from. They could have easily just added in another line of dialogue. They had no time constraint, it seemed. 2-hour movie. So it's funny because like I said earlier, I've come out of this expecting to just be underwhelmed, but that first act was so good. And I remember I turned to my wife when he jumped the boat over a ramp somehow, and it was I was having so much fun, and I'm like, this is actually pretty good. And then all the magical stuff happened, and it was just brutal. Gosh, I don't know how you go from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3 and think, yeah, this is a good idea. I don't know. It's disappointing because they did a good movie. They had a good movie, and then it kept going.
So I'm curious about that a little bit. So the screenwriter of this movie, at least the first listed screenwriter, is Michael Green, who wrote Logan and Blade Runner 2049. And he is working on a series, which I don't expect you guys to necessarily know anything about, but he's working on a series based on the comic or the graphic novel series Why the Last Man, which should be pretty interesting. That's a do you remember what was the Will Forte show? I forget what it was called, but like the last man in the world or whatever the show was called.
No, The Last of Us. I know what you're talking about though.
No, you know what I'm
Last
talking
Man.
about. Yeah, it was a comedy show with Kristen Schaal and Will Forte. Why the Last Man is basically that premise, except for not a comedy in the same way. So that should be pretty interesting. But man, I don't know. Like I would think that the guy who wrote Logan would be pretty good at writing a movie like this, but that said, there's piles and piles of studio meddling all over the place. And so who knows? And there's 2 other writers on this as well. One of whom, I think both of them were the writing team for I Heart Philip Morris, and then the Will Smith movie Focus, which didn't do very well. But I don't know. it is baffling to me because you're right. There's like a whole bunch of setup that is real fun, and it gets not so fun as you kind of get into it. And also, I feel like there's a lot of moments that are really contrived. Going back to my kind of complaint about The Rock not being a very good romantic lead, the way that they kind of get The Rock and Emily Blunt's character to sort of kiss for the first time is like weirdly underwater in a life and death perilous situation, and it's odd. And it didn't work because it's not a romantic moment. Like it's not earned. Like there's just all stuff about that just didn't work for me at all. But yeah, all right. Let's wrap up this part of the show. Jen, final thoughts on Jungle Cruise.
Well, my favorite part of this movie was getting to see the trailer for Dune on the big screen. Like it was dull. It was safe. It could have done something really cool. It could have been really fun. Not even my kids enjoyed it that much. Like this was their first like feature movie in a movie theater for them. And they have like real low bars. Okay? Like every movie is their favorite movie, right? Until the next one. There was none of that with this movie. Like it was fine. Like it was okay, but it could have been cool. It could have been good, and it wasn't.
Yeah. Paul.
Yeah, I think I kind of went out of this thinking, who is this movie made for? It's a surprise to me to find that it was PG-13. I don't think it really needed to be. When I think of Jungle Cruise, the actual ride at Disney World, it's for young children and parents. That's why
also incredibly safe. It's
right. I mean, you get the animatronics that 5-year-olds to 8 to 7-year-olds think are maybe real, and then you get the puns and the bad dad jokes that are for the parents. And I mean, this movie, it seems like the writing team, once they ran out of the ride and telling jokes, they just had nothing else to give. So the only reason I would probably give this a C-, but the only reason it's even that high is because of the first act. The first act is actually tremendously well done. And my goodness, Jesse Plemons, you put that guy in a movie, he's going to steal it. He is hilarious and seemingly dangerous and kind of off kilter. And he's just a very good actor. I don't know. I kind of disagree with The Rock and Emily Blunt. I think they're both fine, but the writing choices are just, that's where this movie loses it. Keep it simple. You don't need to go crazy on this. And I don't know. I surprisingly disappointed.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up my feelings as well. Like I didn't have very high expectations for this movie, but I did hope that it would be pretty fun throughout. I mean, The Rock is usually pretty reliable for a fun, entertaining experience. I love Emily Blunt. I think she's really wonderful in just about every. I mean, she's still good in this. Like, I don't have anything negative to say about her performance in this, but yeah, it just fell flat for most of the movie for me, and yeah, I don't really have a lot else to say about it. It's for me, if you're thinking about Eric July's like 51%, kind of knowing that Disney, Disney is not the best all the time. If you're thinking about movies to put in your 49% of the movies that you want to see from companies that like aren't very good and kind of hate you, don't put this one in that camp. Save it for something else, I guess is what I would say. So, yeah. All right. Well, that is all the time we have for the main body of the episode of this show. However, if you are a supporter of Behind the Scenes and Out of Frame on Patreon or Subscribestar, stick around. We're going to do some bonus content for you here in a second. We're going to answer a few viewer questions, maybe talk a little bit more about imperialism as well, because I think that might be a subject that we can discuss a little bit more. But for everybody else, thank you still so much for listening or watching. And do check us out on Discord, sign up for our email list, and check us out on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And we will see you next time.